Welcome to Aither Insights, your source for the best market analysis on those critical regulations and hot topics in environmental commodities.
We really aim to cut through the noise, find those key nuggets of knowledge for you.
And hopefully give you that aha moment you need to stay competitive.
And today, we're zoning in on something really vital, and it's moving fast. The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM.
Definitely. It's trending, but more than that, it's actively changing how businesses operate worldwide.
That's right. And things are happening now. As of, well, mid-July 2025, there's fresh news out of Brussels.
Yeah, the European Commission just announced these quite significant plans. They're looking at tackling carbon leakage risk for goods produced in the EU, specifically in those CBAM sectors.
Which is potentially a massive shift for European industries, right?
Absolutely. And there was also that public consultation on the future of the EU ETS and CBAM. That just closed July 8th.
So lots to unpack there about what might be coming down the line.
And maybe most immediately practical for many of you listening, we're still in that transitional phase.
Which means those quarterly reports for importers are still mandatory. And the next big one, Q3 reporting.
It's coming up fast, October 31st.
Exactly.
So our mission today, let's break down these recent announcements, look at the debates shaping CBAM's future.
Give you those crucial reminders for Q3.
And yeah, to look ahead at where this whole thing is going. Let's get into it.
Okay.
So kicking things off, maybe with some potentially good news for a lot of businesses.
Right. Earlier this year, back in February 2025, the Commission rolled out its Omnibus package.
Omnibus package. Sounds quite broad.
It is. Think of it as a big push to simplify EU regulations generally, cut down on administrative headaches.
Okay. And how does that connect directly to CBAM?
Well, it has some really specific impacts, especially beneficial for smaller importers.
Ah, okay.
The Commission's proposed a new de minimis threshold exemption, 50 tons.
50 tons. What does that mean exactly?
Boy. It's basically a small-scale exemption. If your annual imports of CBAM goods are under 50 tons by weight, well, you're likely exempt from a lot of the core CBAM obligations.
Wow, okay. That sounds like it could affect quite a few companies. How significant is that, really?
Oh, it's a game changer. Estimates suggest this could exempt around 90% of importers.
90%.
Yeah, mostly small and medium-sized businesses, SMEs.
Okay. And the logic behind that?
It's about proportionality, you know?
Yeah.
For these smaller importers, the admin costs could be huge, way out of line with the value of their imports.
Right. Like, how much are we talking?
Well, median import values might be around, say, $1,600 a year, but the compliance costs, potentially $5,000, even up to nearly $7,000 annually.
Ouch. Okay, that makes sense. But the immediate question then is, if you exempt 90% of importers, does that weaken the whole point of CBAM? The environmental goal.
That's the key question, isn't it? And the Commission seems quite clear on this. They've calculated that even with this 50-ton threshold,
Yeah.
over 99% of the total embedded emissions will still be covered by CBAM.
Oh, okay. So almost all the emissions are still cut.
Exactly. 99.27%, to be precise. So it preserves the environmental objective, but it slashes the administrative burden.
By how much, roughly?
Projections are over 1.12 billion euros annually saved for importers, a big chunk of that benefiting SMEs.
That's huge.
And it frees up national authorities too, right? They can focus their resources on the bigger players, the larger importers.
Makes sense. A pragmatic refinement, not really a loophole then.
That seems to be the thinking.
So that's the de minimis rule, a big simplification. Are there other things coming to make life easier for those who are still in scope?
Yes, definitely. There's a clear trend towards more flexibility, less red tape across the board.
Like what?
Okay, take authorization procedures. That mandatory consultation process for getting importer authorization, it's going to become optional for national authorities.
Ah, streamlines things.
Considerably. And another thing, they're formalizing the role of a CBAM representative, a consultant.
Yeah, exactly. A third party could be a consultant, an environmental expert who can submit the declarations for the importer.
But the importer is still responsible.
Oh, yes. The importer remains liable, but it allows for professional support to be officially part of the process.
Okay, what about the real nitty-gritty, calculating the emissions? That's been a challenge, right?
Oh, absolutely. A major headache for many. But they're making several practical adjustments here, too.
Such as?
Well, for one, they're looking to exclude non-calcined clay.
Okay. Why that specifically?
It falls under a CBAM code, technically, but its carbon footprint is Tiny? Negligible, really? Including it just added paperwork for no real environmental gain?
Right. Pointless burden. Makes sense. What else?
Default values. This is a big one. Importers will get a free choice now
Free choice between what?
between using their actual calculated emissions data
Hmm.
or using the default values provided by the Commission.
Ah, and previously you had to justify not using actual data. Much simpler. And they're also simplifying how those default values are calculated if you do need to use them.
How so?
Instead of complex calculations based on, the worst performing EU ETS installations.
Which was confusing.
Very. Now, the alternative will be simpler. Use the average emission intensity of the 10 countries with the highest intensities where data is available.
Being more transparent.
Much more. And for some specific downstream goods, think certain aluminium and steel products, they're adjusting the calculation boundary.
Meaning?
They'll exclude the final, often less carbon-intensive.
Because most emissions come from earlier stages?
Exactly, from the precursors.
Mhm.
So this simplifies reporting for the producers outside the EU without really affecting the carbon price captured.
That makes sense, focusing on the source of the emissions. What about precursors made within the EU? Is there a risk of double counting carbon costs?
Good point. And no, they've addressed that. If a precursor is made in the EU, already covered by the EU ETS, and the carbon price has effectively been paid,
Yeah.
it gets assigned 0 embedded emissions when calculating the final CBAM goods emissions.
Smart. Avoids double counting, cuts admin burden.
And doesn't impact the environment or the revenue. It's a neat fix.
Any other calculation tweaks?
Yes. 2 more quick ones. The requirement to get default values verified, that's being removed. It was seen as redundant and costly.
Okay.
And for electricity imports, they're amending the regulation Annex 2 to explicitly state only direct emissions count. Clears up some ambiguity there.
These all sound like really practical common sense adjustments. Should ease things significantly. What about the reporting side? Deadlines using the registry.
Improvements there, too. The annual deadline for submitting the CBAM declarations and surrendering the certificates.
Currently May 31st.
Right. That's shifting to August 31st.
Aligns with the EU ETS changes.
Exactly. Gives everyone, especially non-EU operators and the declarants, more breathing room.
And access to the CBAM registry itself. Heard there were issues?
They're improving it. The definition of operator is being clarified to cover parent companies, for instance. Helps with reporting if you have multiple subsidiaries.
Okay.
They're also bringing in mandatory corporate identifiers. Should really improve data quality. Early submissions, maybe up to 50%, had data quality issues.
Oh, that high.
Yeah. And critically accredited verifiers. They'll get direct access to the registry now.
Oh, that should streamline verification.
Hugely. For everyone involved.
Wow.
And reduces the risk of penalties for declarants because the process should be smoother.
Better data, smoother verification, definitely welcome news. Now, shifting to the financial side, how's the burden being eased there, especially around buying those CBAM certificates?
This is another area with some major relief coming. Remember the rule about holding certificates quarterly?
The 80% rule,
Yes. That's being lowered to a 50% rule.
meaning importers need to hold fewer certificates up front?
Exactly. Frees up a lot of cash, significant liquidity. Estimates are over 450 million euros per quarter.
Wow.
And there's more flexibility in how you calculate that required amount, can use defaults or prior year's data. Plus, they're tweaking the buyback rules so importers can sell back all the certificates they were legally required to buy.
Okay, more financial breathing room. Any other big financial changes?
Yes, a really impactful one. The actual start date for selling CBAM certificates.
Originally January 2026.
That's being pushed back a full year to February 2027.
A whole year. That's significant.
It is.
Yeah.
Gives importers much more time to prepare for that definitive phase. And it should provide clearer price signals, too.
How so?
Because the certificate price will be based on the quarterly average of EU ETS closing prices from the actual quarter of import. More direct linkage.
Delaying sales by a year, lowering the holding requirement, seems like real efforts to ease the transition. What about proving carbon prices paid outside the EU? That always sounded complicated.
It has been. Very burdensome often. So another key change. The Commission may now determine default carbon prices paid in third countries.
As an alternative to getting certified proof from abroad.
Exactly. You can still use actual evidence if you have it and want to, but this provides a simpler way to claim deductions.
Especially since many carbon prices elsewhere are lower than the EU ETS price.
Precisely. It acknowledges the practical reality, the difficulty of getting that verified data from every single supplier globally.
Okay, that's a really comprehensive rundown of the simplifications, the refinements, the delays. But amidst all this change, there's still a very concrete deadline looming, isn't there?
Absolutely. Let's not lose sight of that. We are still firmly in the transitional phase of CBAM. That runs right through to the end of 2025.
Which means,
Quarterly reporting is mandatory, still required for importers of all those covered goods.
and the next one is.
Your Q3 2025 report. The deadline is October 31st, 2025. Definitely one to circle on the calendar.
Right. So what's really essential for listeners to focus on for this specific Q3 report? We're past the very first ones now. Presumably people are getting the hang of it.
Well, yes and no. The key thing is, from July 1st, 2024, so covering the period before Q3 importers were expected to start using actual emissions data.
Calculated using the EU's specific CBAM methodology.
Correct. Now, there was some flexibility. Until the end of 2024, you could use default values for up to 20% of emissions for complex goods.
But that flexibility runs out.
It does. By January 2025, only the proper EU method for reporting actual emissions will be accepted. No more 20% allowance.
So Q3 and Q4 of this year are really the last chance to get that actual data reporting nailed down.
Exactly. If you've been leaning heavily on default values, now is the time. Stress test your systems, improve your data accuracy, make sure you're aligned with the EU methodology.
Probably means talking to suppliers.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely crucial. It requires really robust data collection, and that means strong engagement with your non-EU suppliers to get the verified data you need.
And if you don't get it right, what happens if reports are missed or the data's bad?
During this transitional phase, so right now, missing a report or submitting incomplete data can lead to fines from the national authorities.
How much are we talking?
Depends on the member state, but typically ranges from about €10 to €50 per ton of unreported emissions.
Okay, not insignificant, but it gets worse later.
Much worse. From 2026, when the definitive system kicks in and you have to surrender certificates,
Yeah.
the penalty for not surrendering enough certificates is $100 per ton of CO2 emitted above what you've covered. And importantly, there's no cap on that.
Ouch. 100 per ton uncapped. So getting the data right now is critical preparation.
Paramount. This transitional period is your chance to refine everything without facing those much heavier future penalties.
So it sounds like the window to iron out the kinks is closing. What's the single best piece of practical advice for listeners right now?
Honestly, start now if you haven't already. Don't wait.
Start what specifically?
First, be absolutely clear which of your imported goods fall under CBAM. Map it out precisely.
Okay.
Second, start gathering that accurate emissions data, product by product. Focus on using the EU methodology.
And third?
Talk to your suppliers. Engage early, engage proactively. Make sure they understand what data you need, in what format, and that it needs to be verifiable.
So map, gather, engage.
That's it. Acting early reduces stress, builds better supplier relationships, and crucially, avoids those potentially very costly penalties down the road. Don't leave Q3 thinking until October.
Right. Good advice. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. One of the really hot topics in the whole CBAM discussion right now.
The export side.
Exactly. How CBAM impacts EU exporters.
Yep.
That's a key reason for those Commission announcements in early July we mentioned.
Right. The Commission announced plans for new measures specifically to address that carbon leakage risk for goods produced in the EU.
With a formal proposal expected by the end of 2025.
Correct. The stated aim is to support EU producers, ensure a level playing field, basically equal treatment for goods, whether they're made and sold here, imported, or exported.
Trying to stop production shifting to places with weaker climate rules.
That's the core idea. And the mechanism being discussed involves compensating EU producers for the carbon costs they face here, possibly through
Export rebates.
potentially, yes, funded somehow by the revenue CBAM generates.
Sounds reasonable on the surface, maybe, but it's controversial.
Very controversial. We're hearing strong arguments against it.
From who, mainly?
Environmental groups, certainly, but also some industry voices, too. They argue the focus should be on supporting the cleanest EU producers, speeding up the phase-out of those free ETS allowances.
Not propping up polluters.
That's the argument. They say export rebates risk maintaining a dirty status quo, maybe even effectively dumping polluting products elsewhere.
And it potentially undermines the polluter pays principle.
That's a core criticism. Compensating polluters, they argue, reverses that principle and is counterproductive to the climate goals CBAM is supposed to support.
So what's the counter-argument based on? Is that risk of carbon leakage for EU exports actually that big a deal?
That's where it gets really interesting. Critics point to data suggesting it might be what they call a phantom menace.
Phantom menace, meaning the risk is overstated.
That's their claim. They point to 2023 figures. Exports of goods covered by CBAM were actually a pretty small slice of total EU production in those sectors.
Like how small?
Okay, around 18% for iron and steel, 15% for fertilizers, only 7% for cement, and just 3% for aluminium.
Doesn't sound massive.
And overall, back in 2020, all CBAM sectors combined only accounted for about 2.6% of total EU exports to the rest of the world.
So not a huge part of the export economy.
Seems not. And even the Commission itself has apparently stated that overall CBAM has limited effects on exports.
Okay. Any other points the critics make?
Yeah, they also highlight that a good chunk of these exports already go to countries that have comparable carbon pricing, or plan to, like the UK, with its own CBAM coming in 2027.
So the argument is that a blanket subsidy or rebate might be unnecessary or even harmful.
Precisely. The concern is it could undermine CBAM's environmental credibility, essentially subsidize pollution, and maybe even cause friction with WTO rules. Trade disputes?
The idea of exporting pollution while getting compensated for it.
That's the phrase being used, yes. And from a global view, they argue CBAM is already pushing other countries towards climate action. Untargeted export rebates might weaken that positive pressure.
It's definitely a complex balancing act. Competitiveness versus environmental integrity versus global impact.
A real policy tightrope, as you said.
Okay, sticking with the future. Beyond this export debate, what about the scope of CBAM itself? Is it likely to grow?
Oh, absolutely. That conversation is very much alive.
Oh.
Well, that public consultation we mentioned, the one that just closed July 8th, part of that was specifically asking about extending CBAM to downstream products.
Products made using CBAM materials like steel or aluminium.
Exactly. Things further down the value chain. Feedback still being gathered on that.
Are there specific areas being looked at?
Yes. The European Steel and Metals Action Plan, for instance, has already called for extending the scope to certain steel and aluminium-intensive downstream products.
And a proposal on that is expected.
Also by the end of 2025, according to the Commission.
Any other sectors potentially on the list?
Chemicals and polymers are definitely being discussed for inclusion, possibly as early as 2027 or 2028.
So the direction of travel is definitely towards expansion.
It seems clear. The idea is to prevent leakage further down the chain and also stop clever ways of getting around the rules as the system matures. CBAM looks set to grow in reach.
Wow. Okay, as you can clearly hear, just keeping up with CBAM, the new rules, the reporting, the debates, the potential changes, it can feel, well, pretty overwhelming for any business involved.
It really can. And that's where having comprehensive expert support becomes so valuable, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
We understand that staying ahead, managing your carbon exposure accurately, it's not just about compliance anymore, it's about competitiveness.
Right.
Our expertise allows us to offer really targeted support, things like helping secure price certainty for the CBAM certificates you'll eventually need to buy.
Which helps with budgeting and planning.
Exactly. Strategically managing your overall CBAM costs. We also help businesses look at implementing energy efficiency measures,
To reduce the carbon footprint in the first place.
which is key for long-term competitiveness. And maybe most importantly, we proactively keep you in the loop on all these developments.
So operations aren't interrupted and you maintain that competitive edge.
That's the goal. You know, with over 15 years focused specifically on environmental commodities and carbon markets, we've guided thousands of clients globally. It's about providing that precise, actionable support they trust.
It's clear the world of environmental commodities is incredibly dynamic. CBAM is probably the prime example right now of a regulation that just keeps evolving.
It really is. And staying informed, being proactive, that's honestly your best defense against all this complexity.
And your best path to finding competitive advantage within it.
We really hope this Aither Insight today has given you some valuable clarity, maybe some actionable knowledge for your business as you navigate all this.
Thank you for joining us.
Stay tuned for insights that matter.